Last Christmas, I sat at a dinner table surrounded by family and dropped one sentence that shattered decades of silence. My brother's smirk vanished. My mother's face went white as snow. Her fork hit the plate so hard the room froze. All I said was this: "Actually, I just sold my company for $250 million. For the first time in my life, no one was looking past me. But how did I get here? How does a daughter who spent her entire childhood invisible become the one person her family suddenly can't look away from? And why, even after that moment, did I still walk away feeling more alone than ever?" Stay until the end, because the real story isn't the money. It's what the money finally forced my family to see. Before I take you deeper into that Christmas dinner, I need you to do something for me. If you're watching this right now, drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. Are you in your living room? Late at night in bed? On your lunch break? I read every single comment, and I want to know who's here with me tonight. Hit that like button too, because this story took everything I had to share, and it helps more people find it when you do. Now, let me take you back to where this all began. This isn't just a story about a big sale. It's about a mother who always had a favorite and a daughter who learned to survive by disappearing. Why did my mom ignore me for years, even when I begged for her attention? What happened in the weeks after that Christmas bombshell that nearly tore our family apart forever? And the question that still keeps me up at night, was that $250 million worth the lifetime of silence it took to earn it? These are the questions I'm going to answer for you tonight, but I need to start at the very beginning, back when I was just a little girl who couldn't understand why her mother's eyes never quite landed on her the way they did on her brother. My name is Jessica, and I'm 38 years old now. I grew up in a quiet suburban neighborhood in the Midwest, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where summer nights mean fireflies and ice cream trucks, and where secrets don't stay buried for long, except when they're kept inside your own home. My childhood home was a modest 3-bedroom ranch with blue shutters and a maple tree out front that turned brilliant red every October. To anyone passing by, we looked like the perfect American family. My father worked in manufacturing, steady and reliable. My mother stayed home, baked cookies for school events, kept an immaculate house. And then there were the two of us kids, Michael, my older brother by 3 years, and me. But here's what nobody driving past our house could see. Here's what even our neighbors, with all their gossiping and curtain peeking, never quite understood. Inside that house, there was a hierarchy, and I was at the bottom of it. Michael was everything parents dream of when they imagine their perfect child. He was athletic, naturally charismatic, the kind of kid who could walk into any room and own it within minutes. He played 3 sports: football in the fall, basketball in winter, baseball in spring. He had that easy, confident smile that made adults trust him instantly and made other kids want to be his friend. Teachers loved him. Coaches praised him. Girls giggled when he walked by. And my mother, my mother absolutely worshipped the ground he walked on. I'm not exaggerating when I say that every single one of Michael's football games, basketball games, and baseball games had my mother in the stands, rain or shine, cold or heat, without fail. She wore his team colors. She screamed his name. She kept scrapbooks thick with his newspaper clippings, his ribbons, his medals, his certificates. His bedroom walls were covered with trophies and photos of him mid-action, frozen in moments of athletic glory. And me? I was the quiet one, the bookish one, the one who preferred spending Friday nights working on science projects rather than going to parties. I wasn't unpopular, exactly, but I wasn't someone people noticed. I got good grades, really good grades actually, straight A's through most of school. I won the regional science fair 3 years in a row. I taught myself to code when I was 14 because I was fascinated by how computers worked. I spent hours in my room building little programs, creating websites, teaching myself everything I could about technology and software. I thought maybe, just maybe, if I achieved enough, if I was smart enough, if I won enough awards, my mother would look at me the way she looked at Michael. So, I entered the state science fair when I was 15. I worked for 6 months on a project about renewable energy algorithms. I barely slept the week before the competition. I was so proud of what I'd built. I won second place out of 300 entries. When I got home and told my mother, She was folding laundry in front of the TV. She looked up, smiled vaguely, and said, "That's nice, honey. Can you help me fold these towels? I need to get dinner started before your brother gets home from practice." That was it. No celebration. No proud phone calls to relatives. No pictures. Nothing in the scrapbook. Meanwhile, Michael scored 2 touchdowns that same week, and we went out to his favorite steakhouse to celebrate. My father tried, I'll give him that. He would occasionally pull me aside and tell me he was proud of me, that I was special in my own way. But he was so worn down by his long factory shifts and by keeping the peace with my mother that his efforts felt more like apologies than real recognition.
He knew what was happening.
He just didn't have the energy to fight it. And the truth is, my mother's favoritism wasn't subtle. It wasn't something I was imagining or being sensitive about. Everyone could see it. Aunts and uncles would make uncomfortable jokes at family gatherings. "Michael sure is the golden boy, isn't he?" They'd laugh, and my mother would beam with pride, not even registering the implied criticism.
Cousins felt sorry for me.
I could see it in their eyes during holidays. The pity. That look that says, "I'm glad that's not my family." The college planning years made it even more obvious. My mother started a savings account for Michael when he was born. She added to it faithfully every month. By the time he was 17, she had enough to cover 2 years at a decent state school, and she was actively working on getting more. She drove him to college tours. She helped him fill out applications. She cried happy tears when he got accepted to his top choice. When it was my turn, 2 years later, I asked about college savings. My mother looked genuinely confused, like I'd asked her something in a foreign language. "Well, honey, you're so smart," she said. "You'll figure something out. Maybe scholarships? Michael needs our help more because football is so expensive with all the equipment and camps over the years." I sat there in the kitchen, stunned into silence. Michael needed more help? Michael, who got a partial athletic scholarship. Michael, who already had 2 years paid for. But not me. Never me. I figured it out, like she said. I worked 3 part-time jobs through high school. I applied for every scholarship I could find. I got a full academic ride to a state university, not because of my mother's support, but despite her complete lack of it. College was where I started to build the fortress around my heart. I stopped expecting anything from home. I stopped calling to share good news. When I made the dean's list every semester, I didn't mention it at family dinners. When I won a competitive internship at a major tech company, I kept it to myself. When professors praised my work, when I started getting recruited by Silicon Valley firms, when my thesis got attention from industry leaders, I learned to celebrate quietly, alone in my apartment with maybe a nice dinner I cooked for myself. It wasn't that I didn't want to share. God, part of me was still that little girl desperately wanting her mother to be proud. But I'd learned the pattern. I'd share something, she'd give me that vague smile, and then she'd launch into something Michael did. It hurt less to just stop trying. After graduation, I moved across the country for a job at a startup in Austin, Texas. My mother cried when Michael moved just 1 state over. She didn't even come to the airport when I left. I was 22 years old, starting my adult life, and my mother was too busy helping Michael set up his new apartment to say goodbye to me in person. That was fine. I told myself it was fine. I threw myself into work. I was good at it, really good. I understood technology in a way that felt almost intuitive. I could see patterns others missed. I could solve problems that stumped senior developers. Within 2 years, I was leading projects. Within 4 years, I was managing a small team. And that's when the idea hit me. I was 26 when I started building my own company. It started as a side project, something I worked on in the evenings and weekends. It was a software solution for small businesses, a platform that could automate workflows and integrate systems that normally didn't talk to each other. It sounds technical and boring, but trust me, there was a massive need for it. I bootstrapped everything. I used my savings. I taught myself business law, marketing, sales, everything I couldn't afford to hire out. I worked 100-hour weeks. I pitched to investors and got rejected 47 times before someone finally said yes. That first small investment felt like winning the lottery. I quit my job and went full-time on my startup. I was 27 years old, terrified, exhilarated, and completely alone. I didn't tell my family what I was doing. Why would I? They'd never cared about my successes before. My mother still called me maybe once a month, and the conversations were always the same. She'd ask how I was with that polite but distant tone people use when talking to acquaintances, and then she'd spend 20 minutes telling me about Michael's promotion, or Michael's new girlfriend, or Michael's recent vacation. The company grew slowly at first, then faster than I could have imagined. We found our niche. Businesses loved what we offered. We went from 10 clients to 100 to 1,000. I hired my first employees. Then 10. Then 50. By the time I was 32, we had 200 employees and were generating real revenue, the kind that makes investors very interested. I still didn't tell my family the full scope of what I'd built. I'd mention in passing that I had a little company, which was technically true, but I never elaborated. When I went home for holidays, which became less and less frequent, I'd sit quietly at the dinner table while Michael dominated every conversation. He'd bought a house in the suburbs. He'd gotten married. He was having kids. My mother glowed with pride at every update. "I'm going to be a grandmother," she'd shriek, hugging Michael's wife like she'd won the lottery. She'd turn to me with that same polite smile. "And how's your little computer thing going, Jessica?" Little computer thing. That's what my life's work was to her. I'm not going to lie to you, those years were lonely. I dated occasionally, but never seriously. How could I? I didn't trust people easily anymore. I didn't know how to let anyone in when I'd spent my whole life being treated like I was optional. My therapist, yes, I went to therapy, lots of it, told me I had attachment issues stemming from maternal emotional neglect. No kidding. She helped me understand that the favoritism wasn't about me, wasn't because I was unlovable or unworthy. It was about my mother's own issues, her own patterns, her own childhood that I didn't fully understand yet. Therapy helped, but it didn't fill the hole. Nothing really did except work. My company became my identity, my worth, my proof that I mattered even if my mother never saw it. Then, when I turned 35, something shifted. My mother started calling more often. At first, I thought maybe she was finally coming around, finally wanting a real relationship with me. But no. The calls all had the same theme. She was getting older, she'd say. She was thinking about the future. She and my father were updating their will. She wanted to make sure everything was fair. The way she said fair made my stomach turn. I knew what was coming. Sure enough, during one of these calls, she casually mentioned that they were planning to leave the house to Michael. "He has children, you know," she explained. "He needs the stability. You're doing fine on your own and you're not married, so it just makes sense." I sat there holding the phone, feeling like that invisible little girl all over again. Even in death, even in her final accounting of her life and her legacy, I was the afterthought. The one who didn't need anything because I never got anything anyway. That conversation happened in September. By October, my company had caught the attention of a major tech conglomerate looking to expand their software services division. They wanted to acquire us. The initial offer was insulting, so I walked away. They came back with a better number. I walked away again. I wasn't desperate. My company was profitable, growing, and I was in the driver's seat. By November, they came back with an offer I couldn't refuse. $250 million. $250 million. For something I'd built from nothing, from those lonely nights in my apartment, from every rejection and every 100-hour week and every moment of doubt. After the lawyers reviewed everything, after the due diligence period, after all the negotiations and paperwork, we closed the deal 3 days before Christmas. I was 38 years old, and I was suddenly wealthier than I'd ever imagined possible. I didn't tell anyone immediately. I sat alone in my Austin apartment the night the wire transfer hit my account and just stared at my bank balance, this absurd string of numbers that didn't feel real. I cried, not tears of joy exactly, but tears of something more complicated. Relief. Vindication. Grief for the girl who thought she had to earn love through achievement. I didn't call my mother. I didn't call my brother. I didn't post on social media. I just sat there in the silence of my expensive apartment, feeling more alone than ever. And then my phone rang. It was my mother. She was calling to remind me about Christmas dinner. I know you've missed the last few years, she said, her voice dripping with performative hurt. But it would mean so much to your father and me if you came this year. Michael and his family will be there. The kids are so big now. You really should make the effort, Jessica. Something in me snapped. Or maybe it was the opposite. Maybe something that had been broken finally clicked into place. I'll be there, I told her. And I meant it. I booked a flight for December 23rd. I packed a bag. I looked at myself in the mirror and made a decision. I was going to tell them. All of it. Not because I needed their approval anymore, but because I was done being invisible. I was done shrinking myself. I was done pretending my achievements were a little computer thing to make them comfortable. If they were going to see me at all, they were going to see all of me. The flight home felt surreal. I flew first class because I could now, and it felt strange, sitting there with warm towels and champagne while my mind spun through decades of memories. I rented a car at the airport. A nice one, much nicer than the old Toyota I used to drive in college. I drove through my hometown, past the high school where I'd been invisible, past the science fair where I'd won awards no one celebrated, past the library where I'd taught myself to code. Everything looked smaller than I remembered. When I pulled up to my childhood home on December 24th, Christmas Eve afternoon, the blue shutters were the same, but the house felt like it belonged to someone else's memories, not mine. My mother answered the door in her holiday apron, cookies baking in the background, everything looking like a Christmas movie set. She hugged me quickly, one of those side hugs that barely makes contact. "Oh, good, you made it," she said. "Michael's in the living room with the kids. We're eating at 6. No, how was your flight? Or I'm so glad to see you. Or I've missed you. Just logistics." I walked into the living room, and there was Michael, exactly as I'd expected. He'd gained some weight, his hairline was receding, but he still had that same confident posture, that same easy smile. His 2 kids, a boy of 6 and a girl of 4, were playing with new toys that were clearly early Christmas presents. His wife, Sarah, nice enough but vapid, was scrolling through her phone on the couch. "Hey, Jess," Michael said, standing up to hug me. It was warmer than Mom's hug, at least. "Long time no see. How's the tech world treating you?" We made small talk for a while, the kind of surface-level conversation you have with people you're related to but don't really know anymore. Dinner time arrived, and we all gathered around the table. My father said grace, same prayer he'd said my whole childhood. We started eating, my mother's pot roast and mashed potatoes, comfort food that didn't comfort me at all. Michael dominated the conversation immediately, talking about his new promotion at work, about how his son had just made the soccer team, about the vacation they were planning to Disney World. My mother hung on every word, asking follow-up questions, praising, encouraging. I ate quietly, waiting, watching. And then it happened, the moment I'd been simultaneously dreading and anticipating. Michael turned to me, with that slightly patronizing smile I knew so well. "So, Jessica, still playing with that little app of yours? Hope it's paying the bills." The table chuckled, a polite acknowledgement of Michael's joke at my expense, same dynamic as always. I put down my fork carefully. I looked at him, then at my mother, then back at him. My heart was pounding, but my voice came out steady and calm. "Actually, Michael, I closed a deal 3 days ago. I sold my company for $250 million. The silence that followed was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. Michael's smile froze on his face like someone had hit pause on a video. His wife's mouth literally dropped open. My father stopped chewing mid-bite. And my mother went completely pale, all the color draining from her face like someone had pulled a plug. Her fork slipped from her hand and clattered against her plate, the sharp sound breaking the spell. "What?" she whispered. "You what?" "I sold my company," I repeated, slower this time, letting every word land. "The little app I've been playing with? It's actually a software platform that revolutionized workflow automation for small and medium-sized businesses. I built it from the ground up 13 years ago. We grew to 200 employees, thousands of clients, and we're generating $47 million in annual revenue. A major tech company wanted to acquire us. We negotiated for 3 months. I closed the deal on December 21st for $250 million. After taxes and investor payouts, my personal take is about $140 million. I said it all matter-of-factly, like I was reading a grocery list, but inside I was shaking. This was it. This was the moment I'd been invisible my whole life, and now they couldn't look away. Michael found his voice first, but it came out strangled. "You're kidding." It wasn't a question, it was a desperate hope that I was lying. "I'm not," I said simply. "The wire transfer cleared 2 days ago. I have the documentation if you'd like to see it, but I don't think Christmas Eve dinner is the right time for that." My mother was still staring at me like I'd grown a second head. "Why didn't you tell us?" she finally managed. "Why didn't you tell us any of this?" And there it was, the question I'd been waiting for. I took a sip of wine, buying myself a moment. "I did tell you, Mom. Many times over the years. I told you when I started the company. I told you when we got our first big client. I told you when we hit $1 million in revenue. But you never asked follow-up questions. You never seemed interested. It was always 'that's nice, honey,' and then back to Michael. So I stopped trying to make you see me. I just kept building." The rest of dinner was awkward beyond description. Michael barely spoke. When he did, it was defensive. "Well, congratulations, I guess. Must be nice." My mother kept trying to process, asking fragmented questions. "But how? When? Why didn't we know?" My father, to his credit, looked at me with something I'd never quite seen from him before. Respect. Maybe even awe. After dinner, as people migrated to the living room, my mother pulled me into the kitchen. "Jessica, I don't understand," she said, her voice trembling. "Why keep something this big from your family? We could have celebrated with you. We could have been part of it." I looked at her, this woman who'd raised me but never really seen me, and felt a wave of something between pity and anger. "Mom, when have you ever celebrated anything I did? When have I ever been as important as Michael? I won awards, graduated top of my class, built a career, built a company, and none of it mattered to you. Not really. So, why would I share this? What would have been different?" She didn't have an answer. She just stood there, tears forming in her eyes, and I realized she genuinely didn't see it. She didn't see the decades of favoritism, the casual dismissals, the way she'd made me feel like an afterthought in my own family. Or maybe she saw it and couldn't admit it. Either way, I didn't have the energy to explain it to her anymore. I stayed the night because I'd already committed to it, sleeping in my old bedroom that had been converted into a sewing room years ago. Christmas morning was tense. We opened presents, Michael's kids providing the only genuine joy in the room. I'd brought expensive gifts for everyone, probably too expensive in retrospect, and the price tags made things even more awkward. I left that afternoon, hugging my father goodbye with actual emotion, giving Michael and his family polite farewells, and receiving another one of those barely there hugs from my mother. As I drove away from that blue-shuttered house, I felt relief, but also emptiness. The little girl inside me had finally been seen, but it didn't feel like I'd thought it would. The weeks after Christmas were chaos. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Suddenly, everyone wanted to talk to me. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years called to catch up. Aunts and uncles sent Facebook messages congratulating me. And then came the asks. Michael called 3 days after Christmas. He wanted to talk about investment opportunities. He had a business idea and, with my expertise and capital, we could be partners. I declined. A week later, my mother called crying. She'd been thinking about things about the past, about how maybe she hadn't been as present for me as she should have been. But then, almost in the same breath, she mentioned that Michael was struggling with his mortgage, and wouldn't it be wonderful if I could help family in need? I declined that too. More calls came. A second cousin needed help with college tuition. An uncle wanted me to invest in his friend's restaurant. My mother's sister thought I should buy my parents a new house since I had so much now. Everyone saw me now, but they only saw dollar signs. The most painful call came from Michael himself, about 3 weeks after Christmas. He was angry, really angry. "You know what, Jessica? I've been thinking about your company, and I'm pretty sure the core idea came from something I mentioned years ago. Remember when I talked about businesses needing better software? That was my idea. You just ran with it and never gave me credit.
I was so stunned I actually laughed.
Michael, you once said computers were a waste of time and I should get a real job. You've never had an original thought about software in your life. This is desperate, even for you. He sputtered, tried to argue, but we both knew it was absurd. He wasn't calling for credit. He was calling because for the first time in our lives, I had something he didn't, something he couldn't compete with, and he couldn't stand it. I set boundaries, hard ones. I told my mother that I wouldn't be discussing my finances with the family anymore. I told Michael that I loved him as a brother but wouldn't be funding his projects or bailing him out. I told extended family members that my money was my own, and I'd already decided on my philanthropic priorities. These conversations were brutal. I was called selfish, cold, ungrateful. My mother played the guilt card hard. After everything we've done for you, after raising you, feeding you, putting a roof over your head, this is how you treat your family? I wanted to scream. I wanted to list every ballet recital she missed, every science fair she skipped, every time she chose Michael over me. But I didn't. I just repeated my boundaries and ended the calls when they wouldn't respect them. 3 months went by. I threw myself into figuring out what came next. I didn't need to work, not financially, but I needed purpose. I started exploring philanthropy, focusing on STEM education for girls, funding programs that would help other invisible daughters find their worth and achievement even when their families didn't see them. It felt meaningful. And then, in late March, I got a call from my father.
His voice was shaking.
Jessica, I need you to come home. Your mother's sick. We just got back from the doctor, and it's not good. I flew home the next day, my stomach in knots. My father picked me up from the airport, and in the car, he told me everything. My mother had been having memory issues for a while, small things at first, misplaced keys, forgotten appointments. But it had gotten worse. After a battery of tests, the doctors diagnosed her with early-stage dementia. It was progressing slowly, they said, but it was progressive and irreversible. She had maybe 5 to 7 good years left before things would get really bad. I sat there processing this, feeling a complicated mess of emotions. Part of me felt vindicated in a horrible way. See, I wanted to say, I was never the problem. Another part of me felt grief for the relationship we'd never had, and now never would. And another part, the part that scared me most, felt nothing at all. At the house, my mother was in the living room, looking smaller somehow, more fragile. When she saw me, she started crying immediately. Not the manipulative crying from our boundary conversations, but genuine, scared crying. Jessica, they say I'm losing my mind. I'm so scared. I sat down next to her, my body operating on some autopilot of human decency, and held her hand.
We talked for hours that day.
My father and Michael were there too, but mostly it was me and her. And somewhere in that conversation, she said something that cracked me open. I know I wasn't a good mother to you, she said, her voice small. I see it now, or maybe I've always seen it but couldn't admit it. You deserved better.
Michael was just easier somehow. He fit what I understood.
But you were so smart, so independent, and I didn't know how to connect with that. My mother favored my brothers, and I swore I'd never do that, but I did. I did exactly that. It wasn't a full confession, wasn't enough to heal 38 years of damage, but it was
something.
It was the first time she'd ever acknowledged the favoritism, ever admitted that it wasn't in my head. I didn't forgive her right then. I couldn't, but I felt something shift, some small crack in the wall I'd built. Over the next few weeks, I came home more often. I hired the best specialists money could buy to manage my mother's care. I paid for everything, quietly, without making a big deal of it. Michael was resentful at first, until he realized he didn't have to shoulder the financial burden. My father was grateful in a way that made me sad, like he'd expected me to walk away, and was shocked I hadn't. One afternoon in April, going through paperwork with my father to organize things for my mother's care, I found something that made my blood run cold. Property transfer documents, dated 2 years prior. My mother had quietly transferred the deed of the family home into Michael's name alone, not even joint ownership. She'd done it without telling me, during the same period she'd been calling to talk about making things fair in their will. My father looked ashamed when I confronted him. She said it was to protect it from estate taxes, he mumbled. She said you'd understand because you were doing so well. I left the house and sat in my rental car, shaking with rage. Even when she'd known I existed, even when she'd been calling me more, it had never been about me. It had always been about protecting what was Michael's. I could have fought it, could have challenged the transfer, called my lawyers, made things ugly. But I didn't. Not because I was being noble, but because I realized something important. I didn't want that house. I didn't want anything for my mother except what she could never give me. Fighting for a piece of property wouldn't change the fact that she'd chosen Michael over me at every turn. So I let it go. I told Michael he could have the house, but I'd be funding our mother's care on my terms. He agreed quietly, perhaps sensing he'd dodged a legal battle. May came, and with it an unexpected moment. I was home visiting and my mother asked if we could have lunch together, just the two of us. We went to a small cafe downtown, the kind with checkered tablecloths and too strong coffee. She was having a good day, lucid and present. We talked about small things at first, the weather, the cafe's renovations, a book she was reading. And then she reached across the table and took my hand. "I'm proud of you, Jessica," she said. I should have said it 1,000 times before, but I'm saying it now. I'm so proud of who you became, despite me, not because of me. I felt tears burning in my eyes. 38 years. 38 years I'd waited to hear those words from her. And now, when they finally came, they were wrapped in the tragedy of her illness, the acknowledgement that there wouldn't be time to build what we'd never had. "Thank you, Mom," I whispered, because what else could I say? We finished lunch. We walked through the park where I used to play as a kid, the same park she'd taken Michael to for every soccer practice, but rarely brought me to. It wasn't healing, not really, but it was something. It was a small moment of peace in a lifetime of war. That night, alone in my hotel room, I cried harder than I'd cried in years. I cried for the little girl at the science fair. I cried for the teenager who worked 3 jobs. I cried for the young woman who built an empire alone. And I cried for the mother I'd never really had, and the mother she'd never really been. The months since have been strange. I split my time between Austin and home now. My company's acquisition has opened doors I never imagined. I've been offered board positions, speaking engagements, investment opportunities. I started a foundation focused on supporting women in tech who come from difficult family backgrounds. I'm building a life that feels purposeful, even if it still feels lonely sometimes. My mother's condition is stable for now, and I visit regularly. Michael and I have found a wary peace. We're not close, probably never will be, but we can be civil. He stopped asking for money, stopped making claims on my success. Maybe he's growing up. Maybe he's just realized I won't budge. But here's what I've learned, what I need you to understand if you're still watching. The $250 million didn't heal the little girl who felt invisible. It couldn't. Money can't undo emotional neglect. It can't fill the void left by a parent who couldn't or wouldn't see you. But choosing who I let into my life now, setting boundaries, building a life that makes me feel valuable regardless of anyone else's opinion, that has started the healing. I'm not waiting anymore for my mother to see me the way I needed her to. I'm not waiting for Michael to treat me as an equal. I'm not waiting for anyone's permission to take up space. Many of us, especially those of us in our 40s, 50s, 60s, are still waiting for parents to finally see us. Some get it. Some never will. But we can stop waiting and start building lives that make us feel seen by ourselves first. That's the real lesson here. Not that I sold a company for an obscene amount of money, but that even after achieving what most would call the ultimate success, the deepest healing came from accepting what I'd never have and building new foundations anyway. So let me ask you, because I genuinely want to know, have you ever had to choose boundaries over family expectations? What did it cost you, and what did it give you? Drop your story in the comments below. I read every single one, and I promise you, you're not alone. If this story hit close to home, if you saw yourself in any part of my journey, hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs to hear they're not invisible. Subscribe to this channel if you want more true stories about family, forgiveness, and finding your worth later in life. Next story is even more shocking, and I promise you won't want to miss it. Thank you for staying until the very end. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here with me tonight. If this helped you feel a little less alone, then sharing it was worth every hard moment. See you in the next one.